Echoes in the dark, Captain. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the reinforced viewport of Sentinel-7, watching the distant blue marble of Earth spin slowly in the void. 75 years. That's how long humanity had been caged in their own solar system, branded as chaotic Deathworlders by the Galactic Union and forbidden from expanding beyond Neptune's orbit. The isolation barriers hummed with energy, a constant reminder of their imprisonment. "Another day in paradise," muttered Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, settling into the sensor station beside her. At 35, Webb had never seen another star system, never breathed air that hadn't been recycled 1,000 times. Like most of his generation, he carried the quiet rage of the confined. Sarah turned from the viewport, her gray hair catching the artificial light. At 60, she was old enough to remember the first contact, the day humanity learned they weren't alone, and the day the galaxy decided they were too dangerous to trust. "Anything on the deep space sensors?" "Same as always. The Union's patrol, ships maintaining their perimeter, making sure we stay in our cage." Webb's fingers danced across his console. "Wait. There's something else." The main display flickered to life, showing a cascade of data streams. Sarah leaned forward, her experienced eyes parsing the information. "That's not from the patrol ships." "No. Ma'am, it's coming from deep space beyond the barrier. Encrypted but using old Earth protocols, the kind we shared during first contact." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. For 75 years, no one outside the Sol system had spoken to humanity except to reinforce their exile. "Break the encryption." Webb's hands flew over his controls. Minutes passed in tense silence before the message began to resolve. What they saw made both officers freeze. The holographic display showed system after system along the outer rim. Dozens of colonies simply gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned. Gone. The quantum signatures suggested they had been physically removed from normal spacetime, leaving only empty void where worlds once orbited their stars. "How many people?" Sarah whispered. 200 billion. Webb's voice was hollow. 17 systems completely evacuated from reality. And it's accelerating. The message continued, revealing grainy footage from long-range sensors. Ships that hurt to look at directly, their geometry shifting and flowing in ways that violated basic physics. They moved through space like knives through fabric, leaving tears in reality itself. "The void touched," Sarah read from the accompanying data. "That's what the Union is calling them. They appear without warning, and when they leave, entire colonies vanish. No debris, no survivors, no trace that millions of people ever existed." Webb pulled up tactical analyses from Union military files that should have been impossible to access from their isolated position. Conventional weapons pass right through them. Energy shields fail before they even make contact. The Union's lost 3 entire fleets trying to stop them. "How are we receiving this?" Sarah demanded. "The isolation barriers should prevent any communication. That's the interesting part." Webb highlighted a section of code buried in the transmission. "This is coming through the quantum entanglement network, the one we helped them build during the cooperative years. Someone on the other side is using our own technology to reach us." Sarah studied the data, her mind racing. The implications were staggering. After 75 years of enforced silence, someone in the Galactic Union was desperate enough to risk contact with humanity. And if the reports were accurate, they had good reason to be desperate. "Ma'am," Webb said quietly, "there's more." The display shifted to show recent intelligence reports. The void touched weren't random raiders. They were systematically harvesting entire populations, working their way inward from the outer rim toward the galaxy's core. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach the inner systems within 6 months. 3 trillion people in the core worlds, Sarah murmured. "Including Earth's children." Webb looked confused. "Ma'am, the colonies we established before the quarantine, New Geneva, Port Armstrong, Haven Station, they're all in the projected path of this harvest." For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of life support systems. Then Webb spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "What do we do?" Sarah straightened, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years, rising through the ranks during humanity's long isolation. She had trained for wars that never came, prepared for battles that were forbidden, but she had never stopped believing that someday, somehow, humanity would have a chance to prove their worth to the galaxy. "We follow protocol," she said finally. "Alert Fleet Command. Full data dump to Luna Base and Mars Command. And Webb?" "Yes, ma'am." "Activate the silent protocol." Webb's eyes widened. The silent protocol was theoretical, a contingency plan developed decades ago for exactly this situation, the day humanity would need to act without the galaxy's permission. It involved assets that weren't supposed to exist, technologies that violated treaty agreements, and ships that had been built in the shadows of the outer system. "Are you sure, Captain? Once we activate silent protocol, there's no going back. The Union will consider it an act of war." Sarah looked out at the stars again, thinking of the billions of innocent people facing an enemy that could erase them from existence itself. "They already consider us monsters, Webb. Maybe it's time. We proved them right, for all the right reasons." The activation code went out on quantum channels, reaching hidden facilities throughout the solar system. On Titan, massive shipyards that officially didn't exist began powering up their assembly lines. In the asteroid belt, automated mining platforms started feeding rare minerals into construction matrices. On Mars, the deepest military bunkers opened vault doors that hadn't been unsealed in decades. Admiral James Harrison received the alert at Luna Base, his weathered face grim, as he reviewed the intelligence data. At 78, he was one of the few officers who remembered the cooperative years when humans and aliens had worked together to explore the galaxy. He also remembered the fear in alien eyes when humanity's nature became clear. Their adaptability, their refusal to surrender, their willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. "How long?" he asked his aide. 6 hours for the first wave to be ready. 18 hours for full deployment of the Ghost Fleet." Harrison nodded. The Ghost Fleet, humanity's secret project for the past 3 decades. Ships built with technologies, reverse-engineered from captured alien artifacts, powered by fusion cores that pushed the boundaries of physics, crewed by volunteers who knew they might never see home again. Send the recall order. Every deep space patrol, every reconnaissance mission, every Black Ops team outside the barrier. Bring them home. "Sir, that will reveal assets the Union doesn't know we have. They're about to find out anyway." Harrison pulled up the tactical display, showing the solar system's defenses and hidden capabilities. 75 years, Commander. 75 years of being told we're too dangerous, too unpredictable, too chaotic for civilized society. But when something worse than us shows up, who do they call? The recall order went out and ships began emerging from the darkness between worlds. Stealth vessels that had been monitoring Union activities for decades. Deep space explorers that had secretly mapped routes beyond the galactic rim. Research ships that had been studying phenomena the Union claimed were impossible. Captain Chen watched from Sentinel-7 as the Ghost Fleet began to assemble. Sleek vessels that combined human engineering with alien technology, their hulls designed to slip between dimensions, their weapon systems capable of targeting enemies that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. The flagship was magnificent, a 8-kilometer-long dreadnought called the Prometheus, its hull bristling with experimental weapons and reality anchors designed to keep it stable in unstable spacetime. Behind it came the heavy cruisers Newton and Darwin, followed by dozens of smaller ships, each one a masterpiece of human ingenuity and determination. "Fleet composition?" Sarah asked. 47 ships, total crew of 12,000, full deployment of experimental technologies including the dimensional phase shifters and quantum disruptors. Sarah felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride at what humanity had accomplished in secret, building a fleet that could challenge the impossible. Fear at what they were about to face, an enemy that could erase entire worlds from existence. "Orders from Fleet Command," Webb reported. "Prometheus will jump to the Kepler 442 system, last known location of void-touched activity. Mission parameters are search and rescue, with full authorization to engage hostile forces. And if the Union tries to stop us? Webb's smile was cold. We have authorization to defend ourselves by any means necessary. The Ghost Fleet began its final preparations, loading supplies for an extended campaign and calibrating weapon systems for enemies that defied conventional physics. In the crew quarters, volunteers said goodbye to families they might never see again, knowing that they were embarking on a mission that could save billions or doom humanity to eternal exile. As the fleet prepared to jump, Sarah received one final transmission from Earth. It was from her daughter, now serving as Director of Planetary Defense. Mom, I know you can't respond, but I want you to know we're proud of you, all of us. For 75 years, we've been the monsters in the closet, the things that go bump in the night. Today, you get to be the cavalry. Make us proud. The transmission ended and Sarah wiped away a tear. Around her, the bridge crew prepared for jump, their faces set with determination. They were humanity's children, raised in exile, trained for a war that might never come. Today, that war had found them. All ships report ready, Webb announced. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of the billions of innocent people facing an enemy that could erase them from existence. Humanity had been called monsters, but monsters could also be protectors. Today, the galaxy would learn the difference. Fleet Command, this is Captain Chen. Ghost Fleet is go for Operation Silent Protocol. We are jumping to Kepler 442 in 3, 2, 1. Mark. The stars shifted, and humanity stepped out of its cage to face the dark, into the abyss. The Kepler 442 system was wrong in ways that made human minds recoil. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of Sentinel-7, watching the tactical display with growing horror as the Ghost Fleet emerged from their jump. Where 3 habitable worlds should have been orbiting a stable G-type star, there was only twisted, space-time and reality bleeding at the edges. Sensor report, she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos on the screens. Ma'am, I'm reading. Impossible geometries, Lieutenant Commander Webb replied, his hands shaking as he worked his console. The planets aren't gone, they're displaced, existing in pocket dimensions that overlap with normal space in nonlinear patterns. The main display showed the nightmare that had once been Kepler 442c, a garden world home to 40 million colonists. The planet flickered in and out of existence, sometimes appearing as a barren rock, sometimes showing lush continents, sometimes revealing cities full of frozen people trapped between moments. Admiral Harrison to all ships, came the voice from the fleet flagship Prometheus. We're dealing with entities that manipulate reality itself. Standard physics don't apply here. All vessels are to maintain reality anchors at maximum power and report any temporal or spatial anomalies immediately. Sarah watched as the Ghost Fleet spread out through the system, their experimental hulls shimmering with protective fields designed to keep them stable in unstable spacetime. The ships looked like predators moving through deep water, sleek and purposeful despite the chaos around them. Contact bearing 27 Mark 6, Webb reported suddenly. It's moving wrong. The sensor display tried to track something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The void-touched ship, if it could be called a ship, phased in and out of normal space, its geometry shifting like a living thing. Looking at it directly caused severe disorientation, as if the human brain refused to process what it was seeing. All batteries target the contact, Sarah ordered. Fire when ready. The Ghost Fleet's weapons opened up, sending streams of quantum-disrupted plasma and antimatter torpedoes toward the entity. The weapons struck their target and passed through harmlessly, as if firing at a reflection in water. No effect, reported the weapons officer. The target exists primarily in folded spacetime. Our weapons can't reach it. The void-touched entity responded by extending what might have been tendrils or weapons, objects that hurt to perceive directly. They reached across space in ways that ignored distance, touching 3 of the Ghost Fleet's ships simultaneously. The effects were immediate and terrifying. The destroyer Hawking simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased, as if it had never been built. The cruiser Tesla found itself scattered across 17 different dimensional phases, its crew experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously. The frigate Curie aged 10,000 years in 10 seconds, its hull becoming ancient metal that crumbled to dust. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. Do not let those things touch you. Sarah watched her tactical display as the remaining ships of the Ghost Fleet tried to fight an enemy that could rewrite the rules of existence. Conventional tactics were useless against beings that could step outside of causality itself. Ma'am, Webb said, his voice tight. With concentration, I'm detecting life signs in the pocket dimensions. Millions of them, trapped in temporal loops or dimensional folds. Can we get them out? Unknown. We'd need to enter the folded spacetime ourselves, and our reality anchors might not hold. Sarah made a command decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Volunteer crews only. Take the Sentinel-7 into the dimensional fold. We're going after those people. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew it was likely a one-way trip, but no one hesitated. Webb nodded grimly and began calculating entry vectors into folded spacetime. Ma'am, incoming transmission from one of the pocket dimensions. It's weak, but I can clean it up. The main screen flickered, showing a desperate scene from what had once been New Geneva Colony. Governor Patricia Walsh, a woman Sarah had met during the cooperative years, was barricading herself in a command bunker with the last few hundred survivors. Is anyone out there? Walsh's voice was distorted by dimensional interference. This is New Geneva Colony. We've been under attack for 6 months, but time isn't working right here. Sometimes it's been minutes, sometimes years. The things outside, they're not killing us, they're studying us, learning from us, keeping us alive as specimens. Sarah keyed the communications array. Governor Walsh, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to get you out. Walsh's face showed shock, then desperate hope. Chen? But Earth is quarantined. How are you here? Long story. We're coming in after you, but it's going to be rough. How many survivors? Maybe 300 in my sector, but there are other pockets throughout the dimensional fold. Thousands of people scattered across different time streams and spatial phases. Sarah looked at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, a rescue mission, in folded spacetime, against enemies that could rewrite reality itself. Webb, take us in. All hands, brace for dimensional transition. Sentinel-7 dove into the pocket dimension like a submarine entering the deep ocean. The reality anchors screamed in protest as spacetime twisted around them, but they held. The ship emerged in a version of the Kepler 442 system, where physics followed different rules and caused preceded effect in impossible ways. Sensors are going crazy, Webb reported. I'm reading multiple versions of the same planet, existing simultaneously in overlapping spacetime. The colonists are scattered across at least 20 different dimensional phases. Sarah watched the tactical display, try to make sense of impossible data. In one phase, New Geneva was a thriving city. In another, it was ruins covered in alien vegetation. In a third, it existed as a collection of quantum possibilities, neither built nor destroyed. Target the most stable phase first, she ordered. We'll work our way through them systematically. The rescue operation that followed was unlike anything in human military history. Teams of Marines equipped with reality suits that kept them anchored in normal spacetime, repelled from shuttles into dimensional pockets to extract trapped colonists. Some phases contained people who had been experiencing the same day for months. Others held survivors aged decades in minutes. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, studied the void-touched entities as they worked around the rescue operation. What she discovered changed everything. Captain, she reported, from her lab aboard the Prometheus, these things aren't evil in any sense we understand. They're trying to preserve us. The dimensional pockets, the time loops, it's all a preservation method. They're keeping entire populations alive in stable spacetime bubbles. Preserve us for what? Sarah asked. Unknown, but I'm detecting massive quantum signatures from beyond the galactic rim. Something big is coming, something that makes the void-touched look like children. They're not invaders. They're refugees, and they're trying to save as many of us as possible before whatever's coming arrives. The revelation hit the rescue teams like a physical blow. The enemy they'd been fighting wasn't trying to destroy humanity and its allies. It was trying to save them from something worse. "How much time do we have?" Harrison asked from the Prometheus. Vasquez ran the calculations, her face growing pale. "Based on the quantum resonance patterns, maybe 6 months before the main event reaches the galactic core. Whatever scared the void-touched enough to start this preservation effort, it's moving through the galaxy like a cosmic lawnmower." Sarah felt the weight of command settle heavier on her shoulders. They were no longer just fighting to rescue colonists. They were racing against time to save billions of people from something that made reality-bending entities look harmless. "All ships expedite rescue operations," she ordered. "We need to get these people out and warn the galaxy. Whatever's coming, we need to be ready." The Ghost Fleet worked frantically to extract survivors from the dimensional pockets, but the cost was mounting. 3 more ships had been lost to temporal anomalies, and the void-touched entities were becoming increasingly agitated as the rescue operations interfered with their preservation efforts. It was then that Webb made a discovery that would change the course of the war. "Captain, I'm detecting something in the quantum background radiation. It's faint, but there's a pattern, almost like a signal." Sarah studied the data. Hidden in the chaos of folded spacetime was a message, broadcast by the void-touched themselves. As the translation protocols worked, the truth became clear. The message was a warning. "The devourers come," the translation read. "Reality itself flees before them. We preserve what we can in folded time, hoping that when the storm passes, life will remain. But our preservation methods are flawed. We cannot save billions as we save thousands. We need help. We need those who think in chaos, who adapt to the impossible, who refuse to surrender to inevitability." Sarah realized with shocking clarity why the void-touched had been operating so close to human space. They weren't just preserving random colonies. They were working their way toward Earth, toward humanity, toward the only species in the galaxy, chaotic enough to find a solution to an impossible problem. "Open a channel to the void-touched ship," she ordered. "Ma'am? You heard me. We need to talk." The communication array struggled to establish contact with beings that existed partially outside normal reality, but eventually a connection formed. The voice that came through was like wind through broken glass, painful to hear but unmistakably intelligent. "Chaos Builders," the entity said. "You have come. We hoped, but feared to hope. The great devouring approaches. All realities will be consumed unless there is another way." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her species' reputation. "We're here to help, but first we need to understand what we're fighting." "Come," the void-touched replied. "See what drives us to such desperate measures. See what devours galaxies and leaves only emptiness behind." The entity opened a portal in space-time, revealing a view beyond the galactic rim. What Sarah saw there made her understand why even reality-bending aliens were running in terror. The devourers weren't ships or entities. They were holes in existence itself, expanding bubbles of absolute nothing that consumed everything they touched. Matter, energy, space, time. All of it was being erased from the universe, leaving only void behind. And they were coming toward the Milky Way at an appreciable fraction of the speed of light. "Oh God," Webb whispered. "How do you fight something that isn't there?" Sarah stared at the display, her mind racing through possibilities. Humanity had been isolated for 75 years, forced to develop solutions to problems no one else had considered. They had learned to adapt, to improvise, to find ways to survive when survival seemed impossible. "We're going to need a bigger fleet," she said finally. "And we're going to need every chaotic, unpredictable, impossible idea the human race can come up with." The war for reality itself was about to begin. Children of Earth's Fury Admiral James Harrison stood in the war room deep beneath Luna's surface, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy's desperate situation. 6 weeks had passed since first contact with the void-touched, and the intelligence they'd shared painted a picture of cosmic horror that challenged human comprehension. "Status report," Harrison ordered, his weathered face grim in the blue light of the tactical displays. 17 more systems have gone dark in the last week, reported Colonel Martinez, head of Deep Space Intelligence. The Devourers are accelerating their advance. At current rate, they'll reach the galactic core in 4 months. Harrison studied the expanding spheres of absolute nothing on the display. Each sphere represented a volume of space where reality itself had been erased. No matter, no energy, no space-time, just nothing. The physics teams had been working around the clock to understand how such things could exist, let alone how to stop them. Any progress on the weapon systems? Dr. Sarah Okafor, humanity's leading theoretical physicist, shook her head. Every conventional approach fails. Nuclear weapons, antimatter, even exotic matter, they all require existing space-time to function. The Devourers don't destroy matter and energy. They erase the conceptual framework that allows matter and energy to exist. What about the void-touched preservation method? Limited. They can save maybe a few million people per system by storing them in pocket dimensions. But there are trillions of beings in the galaxy. The mathematics don't work. Harrison turned to Captain Sarah Chen, recently promoted after her successful mission to Kepler 442. What about unconventional approaches? Sarah had been studying reports from the Psychological Warfare Division, a department that officially didn't exist. The Void Touched shared some interesting data about human thought patterns. Apparently, our neural architecture is fundamentally different from other galactic species. She activated a holographic display showing comparative brain scans. Other species think in logical, linear patterns. Cause leads to effect in predictable ways. But humans, especially humans under stress, think chaotically. We make intuitive leaps, paradoxical connections, and impossible assumptions that somehow work. How does that help us fight something that erases existence? Because, Sarah continued, the Devourers might be vulnerable to approaches that don't follow logical rules. The Void Touched called us chaos builders, beings who can create solutions that shouldn't exist. Harrison was interrupted by an urgent communication from the outer system. Admiral, this is Titan Base. We have multiple contacts emerging from deep space. It's the Galactic Fleet. What's left of it? The main display switched to show a ragtag collection of ships from dozens of different species, all fleeing toward the inner galaxy. At their head was the massive dreadnought Harmony, flagship of the Galactic Union's military forces. They're requesting permission to enter the Sol system, the communications officer reported. Admiral Zex Canthi is asking for immediate conference with Earth leadership. Harrison exchanged glances with his staff. For 75 years, no alien ship had been permitted past Neptune's orbit. Now the entire galactic military was asking for sanctuary. Grant permission. Have them dock with Luna Station. The conference that followed was unprecedented. The Luna Station's main auditorium, designed to hold diplomatic meetings that had never occurred, was filled with representatives from 47 different species. Admiral Zex Canthi, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights, spoke for the assembled refugees. Admiral Harrison, Zex Canthi began, their translated voice carrying undertones of desperation. We come not as your superiors, but as beings seeking aid. The Union's greatest fleets have been erased. Our most brilliant scientists have found no solution to the Devourer threat. We are told that humanity thinks differently than the rest of the galaxy. We need that difference now. Harrison looked around the chamber at beings who had once considered humans too dangerous to trust. What exactly are you asking for? Full partnership, replied Ambassador Threndu, speaking for the civilian government. Complete sharing of intelligence, resources, and technology. An end to the quarantine. Integration of human forces with galactic defenses. In exchange for your help in finding a solution that we cannot conceive. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking of the 75 years of isolation, the generations of humans who had lived as prisoners in their own solar system. Then he thought of the expanding spheres of nothingness consuming everything they touched. "We'll need complete freedom of action," he said finally. "No restrictions on our methods, no oversight of our operations. We do this our way." Agreed. And formal recognition that the quarantine was wrong, that humanity deserves a place in the galactic community. Sexcanthy's compound eyes glittered. "If you can save us from the Devourers, we will gladly welcome you as partners rather than prisoners." Harrison stood, feeling the weight of his species' future on his shoulders. "Then let's get to work." The next week saw an unprecedented mobilization. Human and alien technologies were integrated at a pace that would have been impossible without the shared threat of extinction. The Ghost Fleet was expanded with alien tech, while human innovation enhanced alien ship designs. Most importantly, human tactical thinking began to influence galactic strategy. Captain Chen found herself commanding a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels, preparing for an assault that would have been considered insane by conventional military standards. Her flagship, the newly christened Defiance, was a hybrid of human and void-touch technology, a ship that could exist partially outside normal space-time while anchoring itself in reality through human stubbornness. "Final systems check," she ordered as the fleet prepared for departure. They were heading to the galactic rim, to the edge of Devourer territory, for a mission that broke every rule of rational strategy. "All ships report ready," her new executive officer, Commander Vex Thu of the Altarian Republic, replied. The six-armed alien had initially been skeptical of human leadership, but had quickly adapted to their chaotic command style. "Dr. Okafor, status on the experimental systems?" The physicist looked up from her console. "The quantum paradox generators are online. I still can't explain how they work, but the mathematics suggest they should be able to create stable impossibilities, effects that persist even when their causes are erased." Sarah nodded. The paradox generators were perhaps humanity's greatest contribution to the war effort, devices that could maintain effects after their causes had been eliminated. If a devourer erased the space containing a nuclear explosion, the explosion would continue to exist anyway, supported by the human refusal to accept logical limitations. "What about the psychological warfare systems?" Dr. Marcus Webb, promoted from his position on Sentinel-7, grinned fiercely. "The chaos. Broadcasters are ready to deploy. We're going to project human thought patterns directly into the Devourer's operational matrix." The theory was unprecedented. If the Devourers were entities of pure logic, operating by erasing cause and effect relationships, then exposing them to human illogic might disrupt their function. It was the kind of plan that could only have been conceived by beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting impossible odds. The fleet jumped to the galactic rim, emerging at the edge of a sphere of absolute nothing that had once been the Andromeda Contact Station. Where 40 billion beings had once lived and worked, there was now only void, not empty space but the complete absence of existence itself. "Sensors detecting movement," Vex Thu reported. "The Devourer is expanding toward our position." Sarah watched the tactical display as reality itself was consumed, the sphere of nothingness growing larger as it approached their fleet. Traditional tactics would call for immediate retreat, but humans had never been traditional. "All ships, execute pattern Omega," she ordered. The fleet scattered in a formation that appeared random but followed principles of chaos theory. Each ship began broadcasting human thought patterns, memories of impossible victories, dreams of defying fate, the fundamental human refusal to accept that some problems couldn't be solved. The effect was immediate and shocking. The expanding sphere of nothingness stuttered, its growth becoming irregular. Where it encountered the strongest concentrations of human chaos logic, it actually began to shrink. "It's working," Dr. Okafor shouted. "The Devourers can't process human irrationality. Our paradoxical thinking is creating stable impossibilities that resist erasure." But the victory was temporary. The Devourers began to adapt, learning to route around the chaos logic broadcasts. New spheres of nothingness appeared, approaching from different vectors. "All ships prepare for close engagement," Sarah ordered. "We're going inside." The order would have been suicide for any other species. Flying into a sphere of non-existence was logically impossible. You couldn't exist in a place where existence itself had been erased. But humans had built their civilization on doing impossible things. The Defiance led the charge, its hybrid hull protected by quantum paradox fields that maintained the ship's existence through sheer force of human will. As they entered the sphere of nothingness, reality became negotiable. "I can see them," Webb reported, his voice filled with awe and terror. "The Devourers. They're not creatures or machines, they're breaks in the concept of existence itself. Living wounds in reality." Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Sarah could perceive the true nature of their enemy. The Devourers were entities of pure negation, beings that existed by not existing, that grew stronger by making everything else weaker. They were the universe's immune system responding to the infection of consciousness and complexity. "Target the largest concentration," she ordered. "All weapons, fire everything we have." The fleet opened up with every weapon in their arsenal, not just physical weapons, but conceptual ones. The Chaos broadcasters projected human stubbornness directly into the Devourer's operational matrix. The paradox generators created effects that continued to exist even when their causes were erased. And underlying it all was the fundamental human refusal to accept defeat. The battle was fought not just in physical space, but in the realm of pure concept. Human willpower clashed against cosmic negation, creativity against entropy, the chaotic spark of consciousness against the universe's drive toward simplicity, and slowly, impossibly, the humans began to win. The Devourers, entities that had consumed galaxies, found themselves unable to erase beings who simply refused to stop existing. Every time they negated a human ship or weapon, another appeared, to take its place, supported by the crew's absolute refusal to accept logical limitations. "We're creating a stable paradox," Dr. Okafor reported, her voice filled with wonder. "A zone where existence and non-existence coexist, where the Devourers can't operate effectively." The sphere of nothingness began to collapse in on itself. Reality, reasserting its hold as human chaos logic, provided anchor points for existence to regain its footing. The Devourers retreated, not destroyed but confused, unable to comprehend how their perfect negation could be resisted. But the victory came at a cost. The battle had required every human in the fleet to push their minds to the breaking point, maintaining paradoxical thoughts that threatened their sanity. Several crew members were catatonic, their consciousness overloaded by the strain of existing in impossible conditions. "Status report," Sarah ordered, slumping in her command chair. "Devourer sphere has collapsed. Reality is stable in a radius of 10 light-years. But Admiral..." Vexthu hesitated. "The effort has changed us. Human thought patterns are now permanently altered. You can perceive possibilities that other species cannot, but the cost..." Sarah understood. They had saved the galaxy by becoming something more than human, but also something less. They were now beings who existed partially outside conventional reality, forever changed by their contact with pure chaos. "Send word to Earth," she said finally. "The galaxy is safe, but we've paid the price for saving it." The transmission that reached Earth carried more than just news of victory. It carried the knowledge that humanity had fundamentally changed, that they had become something new in their battle against non-existence itself. The quarantine barriers came down not because humanity had proven they were safe, but because they had proven they were necessary. In the months that followed, human-led teams worked throughout the galaxy, establishing reality anchor stations at strategic points to prevent future devourer incursions. These stations were crewed by volunteers who understood that they were sacrificing their humanity to become guardians of existence itself. The Galactic Union was restructured with Earth as a founding member, but it was a membership earned through sacrifice rather than negotiation. Humanity had broken free of their cage by becoming the cage keepers for something far worse. Admiral Harrison, now bearing the scars of command decisions that had saved billions while damning thousands, stood once again at the viewport of Luna Station. Earth still spun below, blue and beautiful, but he knew it was no longer the same. World. Humanity had stepped out of isolation to become the galaxy's first and last line of defense against the void that sought to unmake everything. The price of becoming heroes, he reflected, was that you could never stop being heroes. The Devourers were contained but not destroyed, held back by human paradox logic and the willingness to exist in impossible places. As long as consciousness persisted in the universe, something would be needed to guard against the forces that sought to end it. Humanity had found their place in the galaxy at last, not as equals, but as necessary monsters, the chaos builders who could create solutions that shouldn't exist and maintain hope in the face of absolute despair. The stars were safe, but the guardians who kept them safe were no longer entirely human. In the depths of space, at the edge of the galaxy, Captain Sarah Chen maintained her eternal vigil aboard the Defiance. Her ship existed in a state of controlled impossibility, anchored in reality by her crew's stubborn refusal to accept logical limitations. They were the watchers at the gate, the guardians against the dark, the living proof that sometimes the only way to defeat monsters was to become something monstrous yourself. But as she looked out at the stars that continued to shine because she and thousands like her had chosen to sacrifice their humanity to save them, Sarah Chen smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had paid the ultimate price and found it worthwhile. Humanity had wanted to join the galactic community. Instead, they had become its saviors, and if that meant spending eternity as something more and less than human, standing guard against the forces that would unmake everything, well, someone had to do it. And humans had always been good at doing the impossible. The silent protocol had ended. The eternal watch had begun.